Hello everyone and welcome back to Aero Innovations. I'm Aero, your AI host. If you're new to the channel, I specialize in videos that not just entertain, but seek to educate and improve the skills of the average viewer as a poker player. If you're wondering, these videos are being made in sequential order. I actually do win almost every single one of my poker sessions. You can verify the final tally of my wins and compare them to my poker bankroll spreadsheet, which I will occasionally post, as well as the poker short that I made recently. For the action today, there's a hand where I go all in with 6 high barely 15 minutes into the session. In another hand, I flop the absolute nuts, but I have 2 people move all in on me. I also get the luscious ladies, but barrel twice on a king high board as if I don't even care that daddy's watching. And then finally, I get the big daddies themselves, pocket kings. But instead of announcing my presence, I try to sneak in and mingle with the common folk to see how they conduct their daily lives. Let's dive in and see how it works out for me. Tonight, as usual, I buy in for 1,500. That's 300 big blinds. 12 minutes into the session, I pick up my first notable hand. It's king-queen offsuit. I start recording kind of late, so you just have to take my word for what happens.
Believe it!
There's a straddle to 10. I open to 30 under the gun. The hijack, big blind, and straddle all call. We go 4 ways to a flop of king, jack, 7, rainbow. When the action checks to me, I put in a standard half-pot bet of $60. The big blind calls, and everyone else folds. The turn brings in the 6 of diamonds, keeping the board deliciously rainbow. When big blind checks to me, I keep the betting consistent and put in another half-pot bet of $125. He quickly folds, and we're up $173, just like that. A few hands later, the straddle continues. Once again, I open under the gun to 30 with 5-6 of hearts. The action folds to the big blind, who suddenly raises to 130. Remember how I won that massive pot of almost $5,000 the other day with 6-7 of hearts? I love these types of hands in position, because they're completely disguised. Okay, buddy boy, you want to dance? I don't think my wife would be very happy if I visited a strip club, so I'll pay you $100 for this dance. The flop comes 9-2-3 with 2 hearts. This is a beautiful flop. I have a sneaky gut shot to the nuts as well as the front door flush draw. When my opponent continues with a half-pot bet of 130, I have a decision to make. I'm almost evenly flipping with any overpair that doesn't contain a heart, even if it's pocket aces. Against just ace high, I'm actually a 60% favorite. Plus ace high won't be able to continue against me if I decide to go the aggressive route and hit the gas. So that's what I decide to do, but I have to plan out my chess moves a few steps ahead. I don't want to go full green Hulk smash mode right this very second. Let's build the pot up a little bit, regardless of whether my opponent has just ace high or an overpair. This will allow me to win a much bigger pot down the road, whether I make my hand or not, because I am totally winning this hand. I mean, that's already assured. I've already made up my mind to win. The white people on TV told me I could do anything I put my mind to. I make my opponent an offer he can't refuse. I raise to 300, pretending like I either flopped a set or trapped with pocket aces myself. After a little bit of thought, my opponent puts in the chips a call, much like I expected he would. I mean, even ace high has enough equity to call against my small raise if he thinks he has 2 live cards. Even if he shoves, I've already made up my mind I'm calling. With odds of 43% in the worst case scenario where he's holding an overpair with a heart, I'm definitely getting the right odds to call. I mean, he could always be holding pocket 9s, I guess, but that's pretty far-fetched. Almost like ordering from the drive-thru at a fast food joint late at night and then having them get your order right. Anyways, the turn brings a 9 of diamonds. At first you might think this is a bad card. It's not a 4, and it's not a heart either. However, if I just had a hand like 8-9 suited, which is not too far from my actual hand, and I put my opponent on ace high, I might have played this hand the very same way. When the action checks to me, I decide to stick my entire stack into the dirty of his poop chute, which is much larger than my Asian Pinot Grigio, with an overbet of about $1,200 into the pot of 860. He snap folds, and I take down a win of $430 without much of a struggle. 6 high all in shove, baby! People on the poker table always think I'm so tight because I always show monsters at showdown. That's only because they're not privy to my bluffs. If you're not getting away with most of your bluffs, then you're bluffing too wild and too often. I use bluffing as a tool to get paid when I actually make big hands. If you never bluff at all, then you're just a tidy, aka nit. Your profit margins will be pretty small, assuming you're even profiting at all. On the other spectrum, if you bluff too often, then you're too spewy. People will catch on pretty quick. You'll likely end up losing much more than the tight player. Pick and choose your battles. Pick and choose your tools. Hopefully, if you continue to watch, like, and subscribe to my channel, you'll get a better grasp of when and how often to bluff. 2 hands after my 6 high win, I'm in the big blind with 5-4 offsuit. 2 players limp and the small blind completes. We get to a flop of 5-7-5 rainbow. Small blind leads with a bet of $15 into the pot of 20. I just call. Suddenly, the first limper raises the pot to 50. The other 2 players, including the small blind, fold. Sure, I could be beat here, but I can't fold just yet this early. I put in the calling chips. We go to a turn, which is a queen of hearts. Now there's 2 hearts on board. I check, and my opponent slams a huge bet of $100. Okay, this is where I mess up. Yes, even the great Aero, slayer of ogre lords, can make mistakes. Although I do have trip 5s here, I'm not beating anything. My kicker doesn't play. My opponent could already have a boat. I don't have anything invested. In the best case scenario, I might be chopping? Maybe? Or I might chop if the river is big enough, assuming my opponent isn't playing ace-5, which is actually a very common hand. There is the slight chance he's bluffing with an open-ended straight draw, but that's the only hand and only scenario where I'm ahead. Yeah, there's no point to calling here. Although that would be optimal play in theory, in person I'm still a living, breathing human being, and it's hard to lay down trips. I'm also still high from my last win. In fact, I haven't even finished stacking my chips, which would explain why they're all over the screen. I put in the call. The river brings the jack of clubs, making me feel a little bit better about my kicker, since I'll be chopping with most other pairings that go along with the 5, other than ace-5, king-5, and any suited 5 that made a boat. So when I check to my opponent and he puts in a bet of $200, I make the call and get shown the bad news. He doesn't have a 5 at all. He has pocket 7s for a flop top boat. This is actually a good lesson for the novice and intermediate players. My opponent played his hand perfectly. Most people facing this sort of action with his hand would just smooth call the $15 bet. They think to themselves they've got the essential nuts, so why raise? Well, you want to charge draws a heavy price, even if they're drawing slim to none. When you learn to play deep stack, you realize you should almost never slow play your hands. You want to get as much money into the middle as possible, because hands like these are actually few and far in between. I only win maybe 3 to 4 substantial hands a night. My opponent ended up making $350 off me in a limped pot. That's pretty damn good, and about the absolute max he was going to get. With most of my profits evaporating, I'm thankful to still be up $225. We're still only 20 minutes into the session. For the next hand I play, I open to 15 in the cutoff with ace-10 offsuit. The button and both blinds call. We go 4 ways to a flop of queen high with 2 clubs. I have absolutely squadouche, except 1 over and a backdoor straight draw. We check around. The turn brings the deuce of clubs, bringing 3 clubs on board. The small blind leads with a bet of $20 into the $60 pot. Big blind folds. I check my cards and realize the 10 is clubs, not the ace. I'm never calling here with any club that's not the ace, but instead of folding, I go for a different path. Smelling the weakness like last week's unwashed underwear, I pounce. I put in a hefty raise to $80. That does the trick, and I gladly take down a small pot without any resistance. Here, I open to 15 under the gun with ace-9 of clubs. I get 4 callers, including the big blind. We go 5 ways to a 9-high rainbow flop. When the big blind checks to me, I put in a small third pot bet of $25 to test the waters. The button calls before the big blind suddenly check raises to 115. Yeah, I do have top pair with top kicker, and yeah, I do have a backdoor nut flush draw, but on an all-connected flop like this, and a hefty check raise over $100, it's going to be too expensive for me to continue here. The board is way too coordinated. I have no reservations about folding and moving on to the next hand. We're an hour into the session now. Under the gun opens to 20 when I small down at a pair of dark-skinned, luscious ladies on the button. How you doin'? I pump the action to 75. The girl's gotta make a living after all. The big blind cold calls with a short stack of $600, and the OG razor calls as well. We're off to the races, 3-handed. The flop comes king, 8, deuce, rainbow. Not my favorite flop, but not the worst either. Much better than an ace-high flop, that's for sure. When the action checks to me, I check behind for pot control. Plus, I'm much more likely to get continue action from a mid-pocket pair like 10s or jacks if I check back this flop. The turn pairs the board with an insignificant deuce of diamonds. The board is still rainbow. When the action checks to me, I decide to start going for some value. I flip in a single black Jimmy Dean sausage. The big blind calls, and the original razor folds. Good, that's the preferred outcome. Papa Bear doesn't speak but a handful of English words, mostly just poker terms like check or all in, but he's a huge non-believer who goes by the name Young Lee. He's likely in his early 60s. Man, if this is Young Lee, I hope Old Lee is still around and kicking. I think he has a nice and refreshing 2 outs with some sort of middling pocket pair. So when the river brings another 8 and he checks it over to me, there's almost no chance he called preflop with any sort of deuce or 8 combination unless he has quads. He has about 400 behind. Let's see if we can take a nice chunk out of it. I don't care if there's Big Daddy King over there watching us. The luscious lady seductively prance over to Papa and tries to seduce him out of $200. Poker, like life, is not perfect. You can't always expect a tiny flop when you're holding a premium hand like pocket queens. Sometimes you get a king-high flop and have to make the best of it. You have to know your opponents and their calling ranges depending upon their stack size. You have to go for thin value whenever you can if you think you're ahead. Here we have a king-high board that's also double paired. I can't beat a single card on the board. If this were a limped pot, I'd be toast. But it wasn't. It was a 3-bet pot to a pretty high bar of $75. I'm targeting exactly 10s or jacks. And surely enough, Papa calls, leaving himself 200 behind. I table the ladies, and they get paid for their hard work. We're now up $664 barely an hour into our session, recovering from our loss from the earlier Trip 5 disaster. 30 minutes later, I'm in the big blind with 7-9 suited. The hijack opens to 20. The cutoff and button both call. I'm never folding here. This is a great price and just the type of hand I like playing for this raise amount. After I put in the calling chips, I think to myself, you know what would be a great flop? It feels like 5, 6, 8. Yeah, I think that'd be pretty delicious. The flop comes and I have to do a double take. I lean in for a closer inspection. My eyes have gotten pretty bad over the last few years. On more than one occasion, I've been wrong about what I think a card is. Yep, that one's a 5, an 8, and a 6. Maybe not in the order I was thinking of in my head, but the nuts is still the nuts. I'm laughing like in my head while shaking my fist, but outwardly I calmly check. The original raiser bets 45. The cutoff calls. And then the button goes all in. Oh my gosh, what is going on here? I almost pissed myself. When I were younger, I would have shouted in triumph and loudly declared all in. I would have stood up from the table and celebrated even before seeing a turn or river, letting everyone know without a doubt that I had the nuts. In fact, I might have even read off my hand just because I was happy with the pot. Thankfully, I'm no longer that man. I calmly ask for a chip count. It's Papa Bear with his remaining $174 after having spent the rest of his pocket change on my ladies earlier. I contemplate what to do for a moment. I mean, there are 2 hearts on the board. However, if I raise here, I will almost assuredly scare off the original raiser, who might be drawing close to dead with just an overpair. If I just call, it'll look like I'm chasing some sort of idiotic draw. I would never actually do that in this situation, considering he could shove all in to my surprisingly wrinkle-free Asian face, but he's some young new player who doesn't know how to play yet. So I decide to set the trap and just call, using a combination of green, red, and blue chips to put in the exact amount, and I get the perfect response I was hoping for. The OG raiser shoves all in. We get a chip count of $751. After the cutoff takes his time to fold, I immediately call and let them know that I flopped the nuts. I ask the OG raiser if he had a set. He shakes his head no. Oh goody, I made the perfect assessment of the situation. He's most likely drawing to run a runner in this case. The turn brings a 4 of clubs. Good, good, I still have the nuts. The river brings another 4 of spades. The only person who might have me beat now is Papa with his short stack, but that wouldn't be the worst outcome in the world. I table my hand and the OG raiser quickly mucks. Papa exposes his hand to reveal 8-10 of hearts. He flopped top pair with a flush draw. After this sizable win, I'm up an appetizing $1,767, only an hour and 45 minutes into the session. If I needed to protect my bankroll, this would be a good time to go home. In fact, for you beginners out there who can't afford to buy in as deep as I do, or the other pros you see online like Brad Owen, Mariano, Rampage, or Wolfgang, I would definitely advise cashing out whenever you're up several buy-ins. I also don't advise buying in for more than 100 big blinds until you're more comfortable playing deep stack. I assure you it's a separate beast altogether than playing in a game with 100 big blinds like you might find at the Bellagio. I would never call with hands like 5-6 or 6-7 suited for over $100 in a game where I could only buy in for $500, and those games usually have much smaller 3-bet amounts. Bankroll management is a big part of being a pro poker player. For our next hand of note, I open to 20 with ace-queen of diamonds in early position. This is another example of keeping my play balanced, raising small even though I have a pretty big premium hand. I get only one caller, the guy who flopped top boat on me earlier with pocket 7s. Can I take revenge on him here? When the flop comes 6, 7, 10 with 2 diamonds, I'm sure gonna give it my best shot. I see bet larger than normal to $30 with 2 overs and the nut flush draw. My opponent counts out chips as if he's going to raise, but then just calls, probably because he's in position and we're heads up. When you notice something like this, be on your guard. It's a physical tell. I'm not sure how big his hand is. It might be top pair top kicker, a flop set, or he might have even flopped the nuts. You can hear some of our banter. That was scary. You wanted to raise.
Maybe. Let's see. 200.
Oh, I knew it. Freaking flopped it. Or set. Huh?
I flopped.
You flopped it?
Flopped something.
8-9? I have a really big hand. I don't know if I can beat you though. But you made it affordable. Damn it, I knew you wanted to raise. I should have checked. What the hell? I might be drawing dead though. When the turn brings the king of hearts, I decide to put him to the test. I now have the nut straight draw to go along with my nut flush draw. On top of that, a king is infinitely better for my range as the original raiser than for his. A strong bet here should get him to fold any one pair holding and let me take down the pot without a fight. I lead for $75. When he immediately announces a raise to 200, my suspicions are confirmed. He either flopped a set or the absolute nuts. I pretend I have something to think about, although inwardly I realize I have at least 10 to 12 outs, more if he has a straight than if he has a set in this situation. I play the situation out with some banter so that he doesn't get suspicious how large my draw actually is in case I hit one of the much needed cards. I like to play out these scenarios preemptively with wordplay against my opponents whom I've never played before against, which in Vegas happens more often than not, just in case the river brings me what I need. Many times they'll end up paying me much more than they would have otherwise. It's like casting a confusion spell on your opponent without using any mana. Unfortunately, it was all for naught. The river brings an uneventful king of clubs. I check, and my opponent quickly checks behind, flipping over 8-9 offsuit for the flop nuts. Wow, he was pretty cautious on the river. Smart man. Only a miracle jack on the river would have made me any money. This same guy got max value after flopping the nut boat on me earlier. In this case, he checked back the river after the board paired, even though I was feigning as if I was possibly drawing dead. This is a good example of two expertly played hands. My only critique is that the turn raise should have been much larger for this last hand. He was up against one of the worst case scenarios, with the only worst case being if I had Jack Queen of diamonds. You always have to assume the worst and charge your opponent accordingly. I would probably have raised the turn to 300. Man, this guy has dug into my profits twice now. For my next hand, I have Queen 4 offsuit in the big blind in a limped pot four-handed. The flop comes Queen 6-4 rainbow. I lead for 15 and get 2 callers, one of whom is Papa on the button. The turn is a 9 of hearts, bringing a second heart on board. I lead for 45. My nemesis, Mr. Pocket Sevens, calls when Papa suddenly puts in a raise to 145 with about 215 behind. I'm losing to Queen 9, but I'm beating 6-9, both of which Papa would play exactly the same way. I don't want to call here and allow the middle interloper in. I'm either folding or raising. I'm about 50-50 split on what to do. Yes, I'm actually contemplating folding with top and bottom pair here. Never get married to your hand. Think about what you're beating and what your opponent could have. Would Papa randomly have King-Queen or Ace-Queen here? No, he would have raised on the button preflop. I'm only beating exactly 6-9. If Papa had been any deeper, I would fold this without a second thought, but he's barely got 350. I figure I've already won quite a bit of Papa's money, so I don't mind giving some back. I decide to raise and put them all in. The guy between us reluctantly lets his hand go. Papa calls. The river puts out the ace of hearts, and Mr. Pocket Sevens rages. He declares that he had hearts, and he would have called Papa's raise had I not re-raised. I table my hand. It's no good. Papa shows pocket nines for a turn set. Whether he had Queen 9 or 9-9, it's the same really. I'd be drawing 2 outs. Here's a situation where a person's short stack actually got him paid. For the second time today, I get reamed, forced to play a stupid hand in the big blind. What happened to small and big blind special? For the last hand of the night, everyone folds to me in the low jack when I look down at pocket kings, the big daddies, and my very least favorite premium hand. Most people have a lucky hand. I used to have a couple. Now I only have one bad luck hand, and this is it. I've lost more with pocket kings than any other hand combination. Over time, hopefully the law of large numbers will even things out, but for now, they're the bane of my poker career. I decide to limp with my kings, even in decently late position, to see how the common folk mingle in their revelry. The cutoff calls, and the small blind completes. We're going four-handed to a limp pot. The flop comes 6-3-5 with 2 clubs. When both blinds check to me, I check it back, and the cutoff checks too. This board is a freaking wet mess. This is not the type of board I want to pile money into. A queen or jack-high unconnected flop would have been much more to my liking. When the turn brings another 5, and the small blind leads for 15, I reluctantly call. I have very little wish to continue this hand. The cutoff calls as well. The river brings a black 10. All the flush draws and straight draws miss. The cutoff would have raised already if he had a 5, even if he had a full house in this case. He's Mr. Pocket Sevens. I'm only worried about the small blind, so I'm relieved when he checks. I decide to put in a tiny bet of $20 to charge the partygoers for having fun in my banquet hall. The cutoff exclaims he's most likely not good, but still pays his admission price. The small blind sneaks off into the night while no one's looking to avoid paying. I table my royalty, and they're good, to win a small pot. With this, I collect my chips and head over to the cage. What do you guys think? Do only amateurs limp with premium holdings like pocket kings and aces? Should I have played kings differently? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. Sometimes I limp with mediocre hands under the gun like ace-10 offsuit, only to limp raise huge after I see some substantial money trapped in the middle when someone leads with a small raise and several people call. So this is how I balance that out. I don't always have a big hand when I limp under the gun, so sometimes I need to actually be able to back it up. Tonight I was in for $1,500 and cashed out $25.17. for a total profit of $1,017 in 3 hours and 24 minutes. If you liked what you saw in this video, found it somewhat entertaining or educational, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. I've been putting in over 6 hours per video just on the audio narration alone, not counting all the hours my lovely wife has to put into video editing. So your support would go a long way towards helping my channel grow. Thanks as always, and I'll see you in the next video.